Hey guys! Tonight we travel far back in time, past Cleopatra, past the pyramids, past even the first hieroglyph scribbles on temple walls, to a quieter, sleepier corner of ancient Egyptian life, the morning routine of a humble baker. You're not a pharaoh, not even a priest. You're just someone who smells like flour, wakes up before the sun, and somehow finds peace in the scent of warm yeast and burning dung. You probably won't survive this timeline's breakfast, much less its kitchen fires. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up before Ra even begins his lazy climb into the sky. The air is cool, still heavy with night. And your tiny mud brick house smells of yesterday's ashes and the tang of barley. Someone is already mumbling a hymn in the courtyard. You groan, roll over, and immediately regret it. The straw mat has poked your spine in exactly the same spot for 5 years straight. Outside, your younger cousin is already grinding grain. She looks like a sleepwalking cat, rhythmically rocking the quernstone back and forth, the dust rising in a gentle halo around her. She doesn't look up when you shuffle past with your eyes half shut and your hair sticking up like a papyrus frond struck by lightning. Your job begins with heat. Fire is the first god you must please. You crouch beside the clay oven in the outdoor kitchen, coaxing the embers from last night's cooking. There's a delicate ritual to this. If you blow too hard, you'll smother it. If you hesitate, you'll be late. You whisper a few words to Bess, the dwarf god of households and poorly behaved kitchen fires, and watch as a curl of flame finally licks up around the straw kindling. Today, you'll make over 80 loaves, some for the household, some for trade, and a few, just a few, for the temple. Because even the gods need carbs. You stretch and yawn as the dough from yesterday waits in its basket, swollen and bubbly like it's dreaming. You poke it gently with your finger. It sighs back. Flour in this time is ambitious. It contains not only ground emmer and barley but also small stones, bits of husk, and, if you're unlucky, the occasional rogue beetle leg. Historians still argue whether the high rate of tooth wear in ancient Egyptians was caused more by gritty flour or the endless arguments with teenage sons. Either way, you'll chew carefully today as you need. The sun finally peeks over the roofline, turning everything gold. Your muscles ache, but you find comfort in the rhythm. Push, fold, slap, stretch. It's like a dance passed down through generations, one that your hands remember better than your brain. You hum a tune your grandmother used to sing, something about how good bakers make round loaves and bad bakers make excuses. The courtyard begins to buzz with life. Children chase chickens. A neighbor trips over a goat. Someone sneezes in the flour pile. Normal morning chaos. You're still barefoot, toes crusted with dried dough, and you can't find your ladle, but that's a problem for future you. You glance toward the sky. Ra is fully awake now, beaming down with that smug celestial glow. You imagine him sipping coffee somewhere in the cosmos, chuckling at mortals and their poorly proofed loaves. Suddenly, your aunt appears with the temple list, a wooden board covered in smudged ink and papyrus strings. You sigh. The high priest wants 5 dozen flatbreads by noon, and they must be crisp, yet soft and circle perfect, as if geometry were edible. He also wants 1 honey loaf shaped like a lotus flower and 2 dozen fig cakes blessed with a sprinkle of myrrh. No pressure. You get to work. The fire crackles. The dough rises. And the smell, oh, the smell, begins to float down the alley like a holy offering. People start to hover near your door, pretending they're just passing by. One elderly man coughs pointedly. Another accidentally drops a copper coin. You pretend not to notice. You'll trade leftovers later for gossip. Your cousin brings a clay jar of date syrup. Licking her fingers with zero shame. You scowl. But she just grins and flicks flour at you. The sun climbs higher. The air thickens. You sweat. You sing. You bake. And somewhere, deep inside the temple, a god is already licking his divine lips. You wash your hands in a chipped clay bowl, twice. Just in case one of the gods is watching. Kneading is sacred work. Bread is not just food here, it's life. Ritual. Bribe. Offering. Even unit of salary. Some say a good loaf can smooth over a bad omen. Others believe bad dough invites curses. You, personally, have seen a priest burn a whole batch because someone sneezed on it. That priest later tripped into a basket of eels. Coincidence? Historians still argue whether gods punish through irony. You sprinkle more flour on the stone slab. It's already sticky from yesterday. But cleaning it would require energy, and energy is for kneading. The dough you pulled from the basket is soft. But it's stubborn. Like an angry goose in food form. You slap it once to assert dominance. It slaps back. It will be a long morning. You begin the rhythm, press with your palms. Stretch it forward. Fold it back. Over and over. Your back begins to ache. Your arms burn. Somewhere, your grandmother's voice rings in your head, knead it like you're massaging a pharaoh's pride. You're not entirely sure what that means. But it sounds appropriately disrespectful. The texture changes slowly, from sticky despair to a springy, elastic delight. A few kids gather near the kitchen wall, peeking in to watch. You exaggerate your motions, just to entertain. You throw the dough high. Let it flop on the board with a slap. They giggle. You curtsy. Your cousin throws you a figure. Sometimes, if your arms grow tired, you switch techniques. Use your elbows, your knees. Once, during a particularly long baking day, you and two others took turns stepping on a cloth-wrapped batch. It worked beautifully until someone slipped and face-planted into the grain bin. You still tell that story to strangers on market days. The dough fights back. It always does. It's testing your will, your patience, your forearms. And you, as always, fight back with gentle fury. You hum an old tune again. The beat matches the kneading. Push, pull, fold, stretch. A temple boy appears suddenly, panting, holding a small papyrus scroll. Another change to the order. Of course. The priests now want half of the flat bread to be mixed with crushed coriander and the other half shaped like Anubis's head. You sigh. The last time you tried to make animal shapes, someone mistook your falcon loaf for a donkey. It still got offered. But you received a lot of raised eyebrows. As you divide the dough into even lumps, you marvel at how quickly your fingers have learned the measurements. You don't need scales or cups, your hands just know. This one's too light. That one too fat. The third one perfect. It's like sculpting clouds. Heavy, sticky, slightly rebellious clouds. You begin shaping the loaves. The round ones are for the family. The flat ones for trade. The Anubis ones, well, you just do your best. You pinch ears, snip snouts, poke eyes. It's a little terrifying, but passable. You hope the gods have a sense of humor. Your cousin finishes the second round of grinding and brings more flour. You both glance at the rising pile of dough and then at each other. It's going to be a long day. But you grin anyway. Because deep down, despite the sore muscles and ridiculous requests, you love this. You love the way the dough becomes obedient. The way it puffs in heat. The quiet power in creating something from nearly nothing. As the last ball of dough is shaped and laid aside, you stretch your back and sigh. The sun is climbing. Your hair is plastered to your forehead. Your hands are caked in flour and sweat. But the dough is done. It rests like lazy little sphinxes on wooden boards, ready to meet the fire. You glance around, checking everything: flour, water, wood, shapes. herbs. A familiar peace settles over you, the kind that only comes after a long battle well fought. The kind that smells like yeast and victory. You take a moment to breathe. The dough is done. The shapes are shaped. And the oven still holds enough heat to sear a pigeon mid-flight. But before anything bakes, there's one more step that must be followed, the blessing of the grains. It's not official. There's no scroll or commandment about it. But everyone does it. Even the most cynical bakers will pause for a moment before baking, brush flour from their tunic, and mutter something skyward. You do the same now, pressing 2 fingers to your lips. Then the dough. Then the air. Your grandmother used to call it tickling Osiris' beard. You never quite understood it. You still do it every single time. Grain is sacred. Osiris, god of the afterlife, is also the god of fertility. And in a convoluted mythological twist, of wheat. So every seed, every husk, every kernel is a piece of a divine puzzle. You once watched a priest weep over spilled barley, then yell at a cat for causing it. The cat, unimpressed, knocked over the rest and left. You've always felt the grain itself has moods. Some days it's soft and compliant. Other days it clumps up like camel spit and refuses to mix. And sometimes it turns fuzzy. That's when the real trouble starts. Mold in ancient Egypt was not just unhygienic. It was seen by some as a sign of corruption, a rot in the moral order, or worse, divine punishment. There was a time when a nobleman accused his baker of cursing him through a moldy loaf. The poor man had no defense except it was humid. He was fined 3 goats and forbidden from baking crescent-shaped bread ever again. Crescent shapes, apparently, offended the moon goddess that week. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians believed mold was evil, medicinal, or just annoying. But you've seen people sprinkle salt around their dough to banish invisible demons. You've even seen a woman whisper apologies to her barley before grinding it. One time, your cousin sneezed near the flour bowl and immediately spent an hour waving incense around the kitchen just in case a bad spirit had entered through her nostrils. Superstition lives in your fingertips. You find yourself tapping the dough 3 times before putting it in the oven. Not because you believe in curses, but because everyone else does. And flour is too expensive to waste on a jinx. You once heard a bizarre tale told by a passing spice merchant. He claimed that in the far south, there were people who buried their flour in the ground for 7 days before using it, so it could absorb the silence of the earth. Another merchant laughed at this and countered with his own story, a temple baker who refused to speak while making dough for funerary rites, for fear his words might be baked into the loaf and follow the dead into the afterlife. You're not sure if either is true, but you've been extra quiet since that day. Today, the flour has behaved. You blow gently on the loaves one last time, partly to cool them, partly as a silly habit. Your cousin rolls her eyes. You ignore her and flick a grain of barley at her nose. You load the loaves into the clay oven carefully, using a long paddle made from a single palm branch. You slide each loaf onto the hot stone with reverence. The heat hits your face like a kiss from Ra. The smell is immediate, warm, toasted, earthy. You smile. Then you spot it. A small patch of grey fuzz on the edge of one forgotten dough ball. Your heart skips. You freeze. You glance around like you've just seen a ghost in the kitchen. Your cousin notices, walks over, sees it too. She gasps. You both stare in silence. Is this a curse? An omen? A sign that Osiris disapproves of your attempt at an Anubis-shaped loaf? She leans in close, sniffs, makes a face. Maybe it's just a mushroom? She whispers. You both nod solemnly. Then, without another word, you take the dough outside and bury it under the sycamore tree, just in case. As you return to the oven, your cousin has already lit incense and is muttering something about protecting the yeast spirits. You let her be. The loaves bubble quietly behind her, unaware of the drama they just avoided. You sit beside the fire and stretch your legs. The work will continue. More dough. More shapes. More rituals. But for now, the grain is quiet. The gods are watching. And none of the bread is fuzzy. You've heard people say that Egyptian bread is kissed by the sun. That sounds poetic until you realize how literal it is. In this heat, you could probably roast a duck just by leaving it on your roof tiles. And yet, even that blazing sun needs help, because no good loaf ever rose from sunshine alone. It also takes smoke, sweat, and something very special, dried animal dung. Yes, dung. You haul the next batch of fuel from the pile stacked near the wall. Dried cow patties, carefully shaped and left out under the sun until they're firm, light, and flammable. You're not sure who first discovered this, but you'd bet it wasn't a priest. Probably some desperate farmer with no firewood and too many cows. You crumble one patty into the hearth. The smell rises like a ghost, earthy, pungent, weirdly familiar. You don't flinch. You've smelled worse. In fact, you probably are worse. You haven't bathed since midweek and your left sandal has something squishy in it that you're determined to ignore. Your cousin gags and fans her face. Blessed be the cow, she says, pinching her nose. She feeds us. And she burns for us. You nod solemnly. You've both been raised on this dual reality, the sacred and the stinky coexisting in perfect harmony. The dung starts to catch. Orange flames lick the underside of the oven. The flatbreads inside begin to bubble. You lean forward and inhale, not the dung, but the transformation. The smell of flour becoming crust. Of dough finding its soul. You'd argue it's almost spiritual. Your cousin would argue it's just carbonized wheat and divine nonsense. As the fire strengthens, you adjust the oven's clay lid to control the airflow. Too much heat and you'll burn the loaves. Too little and they'll come out like beige pancakes. You shift your weight. Ears tuned to the faint crackle. Eyes scanning for smoke color. Pale gold, good. Black, bad. You're basically a bread whisperer. Meanwhile, the sun beats down like it has something to prove. Your forehead is damp. Your tunic sticks to your back. You've become part of the oven. A moving, sweating, baking appendage. The dog that usually naps under your bench has wisely fled into the shade. You squint at the horizon. Somewhere out there, another baker is probably doing the same dance, dodging smoke and praising the same fire. You wonder if they're thinking about their sandal. 2. The courtyard shimmers. Heat waves ripple above the clay walls. A neighbor walks by and waves lazily. He's carrying a platter of fish so pungent even the flies look alarmed. You wave back. Then return to your station. The bread is nearly done. Using a split reed, you prod the loaves gently. Crisp edges. Soft centers. Beautiful. You pull one out and break it in half. Steam wafts upward like an offering. Your cousin leans in, steals half, and chews thoughtfully. Needs salt, she says. You toss a pebble at her. There's an art to deciding when the bread is perfect. Too early, and it's gummy. Too late, and it's charcoal. You've developed a sixth sense for it, an instinct born from hundreds of burnt loaves and 2 fires that nearly took your eyebrows. You line the finished loaves on a reed mat, letting them cool while the next batch goes in. One of the temple runners shows up to collect the first tray. He's a fussy little thing, always sniffing like he's judging the sacredness of your crust. You hand him the bread with both hands, make a formal bow, and whisper a fake incantation for effect. He scowls. You wink. He walks off muttering something about amateurs. You sit down. Your bones pop. The dung fire crackles behind you. Smoke curling skyward. You stare at your hands, flour-caked, sun-browned, slightly burnt, and smile. You're not just a baker. You're a fire tamer, a dung handler, a sun-whispering dough witch. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Just when you think the day has reached peak absurdity, dough shaped like gods, loaves blessed with incense, Dung fires whispering secrets to the sun. You hear a voice that makes your shoulders sink. Urgent order from the estate of Lady Kenty. You don't even look up. You know that voice. It's one of the noble runners. Always arriving sweaty, self-important, and holding a scroll like it was handed to him by Ra himself. Your cousin sighs loudly. You mimic her but with more flair. The scroll is thick. Never a good sign. You untie the red string and unroll it slowly, eyes scanning the ink with growing dread. Order. 120 triangle loaves for mourners, 30 date honey rounds for priests, 5 elaborately decorated funeral cakes, shaped like lotus blooms, 2 swan-shaped sweetbreads for ceremonial release, 1 large central bread effigy, size, as tall as a crouching servant. You blink. You reread. You blink again. Is this for a festival? You ask. Daring hope. The runner shakes his head. A noble woman's funeral. Must be delivered by sunrise tomorrow. Of course it's a funeral. The dead eat well here. Better than the living. You roll the scroll back up and mutter something impolite under your breath. You and your cousin look at each other for a long, defeated moment. Then without a word, you both start cleaning the flat stone. The day is no longer yours. You begin with the triangle loaves. Easy enough, standard for morning rituals. Apparently, the triangle represents both stability and grief. Or maybe it's just a convenient shape that stacks well in baskets. Historians still argue whether shape symbolism came before or after someone said, "This fits nicely in a donkey cart." The flour runs low. Your cousin bolts to borrow more from the neighbor who always oversifts and pretends not to hear you knock. You, meanwhile, sketch out a lotus cake on a broken pottery shard like some kind of culinary artist. The petals, you decide, should curl upward, but not too much, or it'll burn. You start working on the sweetbreads. The swan shape is tricky. You try once, and it looks like a smug duck. You try again, it becomes a lopsided goose. On attempt 3, your cousin returns and bursts into laughter. That's a hippo with wings. She gasps. You glare. It's conceptual. You say, the oven is now a furnace. The dung smoke clings to everything. Your hair smells like roast goat. Your fingernails are permanently flour-stained. But you're in the zone. You hum funeral hymns as you shape dough. You whisper apologies to each loaf as you press it. You name the swans after relatives you never liked. Your cousin nearly chokes laughing when you mutter, "Fly, Aunt Nefret, into the afterlife with crispy grace." The real problem arrives when you start the effigy. They want it as tall as a crouching servant. That's vague and very inconvenient. You guess about 2 feet. Maybe 3. You've never crouched for measurement before. You squat beside the dough and nod. Yeah, that's about right. You lie. You mix in extra barley, hoping it will hold its shape. You carve the edges with a spoon. Add eyebrows. Then regret the eyebrows. You try to smooth them out but it just looks like the loaf is judging you. Your cousin helps you carry it to the shade. It wobbles ominously. You prop it with fig branches like scaffolding. The oven may not even fit it. You contemplate building a new one out of bricks and prayer as the sky turns orange. You've finished the triangle loaves and one of the lotus cakes. There's flour on the dog now. Someone must have sat in the honey. You don't even care. The sun dips below the roofline. The fire glows gold. You and your cousin sit on overturned baskets, chewing burnt scraps and debating how you'll deliver this monstrosity. A cart? A wheelbarrow? The shoulders of a reluctant uncle. Finally, you agree, carry the small ones tonight. Deliver the effigy at dawn. If it survives the night. If no dogs eat it. If it doesn't explode from ambition and humidity. You lean back against the wall. Exhausted but weirdly proud. The dead might be gone, but their parties are very much alive. The air is cooler after sunset, but your brain is still cooking. You've shaped more bread today than you've spoken words. Your wrists ache. Your knees crack like papyrus scrolls. And you've just realized the effigy's face is starting to droop slightly. Gravity wins again. Your cousin stifles a laugh and points. He looks like he just heard who he's being buried with. You glare. He looks wise. You say. And tired. Like me. You stretch your arms and decide to check on your flower stash. Tomorrow's deliveries depend on it. You shuffle over to the storage hut, a tiny stone outbuilding with a creaky door and a suspicious smell. You light a small oil lamp and peek inside. And then you freeze. Your flower jars are lighter. 2 are half empty. A third looks like someone tried to scoop with their hands and left a powdery trail on the floor. There are also footprints. Small ones. Flowery ones. Leading away from the door. You stare at them for a long time. As if they might apologize. You summon your cousin. She inspects the scene with dramatic flair. A thief. She whispers. As if you were being watched. A sneaky, flower-dusted thief. You nod. And a sloppy one. The trail leads around the back wall and disappears into a cluster of reeds. You both follow it like detectives in a comedic mystery. Your lamp flickering like it knows something. At one point, the footprints double back, then do a circle. He panicked. You mutter. Classic first-time flower thief move. You find the remains of a broken jar near the canal, half buried in the mud. Nearby, there's a sandal. Just one. Small, worn, and dusted with flour. You exchange looks. There are only 3 children in the village with feet that size. And only one of them has a reputation for borrowing things that don't belong to him, including, once, a priest's wig. The suspect is clear by now. It's too dark to pursue justice. You make a note to confront him at the morning market, preferably with the sandal raised high like a divine symbol of retribution. But for now, you sigh and walk back to your courtyard, where the effigy seems to have drooped another inch. You salvage what you can. The triangle loaves are cooling. The swan bread is packed. The lotus cakes need decorating. And your cousin is busy attempting to pipe date honey swirls using a hollowed reed. She's sticking out her tongue with focus. You decide not to mention the theft. Not yet. Let her have this moment. You sit beside the fire and begin sifting what remains of the flour. It's gritty. Your fault. Really, you hadn't done the second pass. You hum softly to distract yourself, rhythmically tapping the sieve like a drummer stuck in a bakery. Then you remember the backup stash, hidden beneath an old cloth, tucked behind the water jar. A gift from your grandmother, special flour, sifted thrice, reserved for ceremonies or emergencies. You hesitate. Is this worth it? You glance at the half-melted effigy, the squashed swan bread, the order scroll that demands divine beauty, and decide, yes, this is war. You uncover the cloth. The jar still holds weight. You crack the seal. The flour inside glows faintly in the lamplight, clean, dry, sacred. You whisper thanks. Then you get to work. You remake the lost loaves with mechanical precision. No more jokes. No more flair. Just muscle, memory, and muttered curses toward children who think theft is cute. Your cousin joins in once she realizes you've gone serious. She doesn't ask. She just needs. By midnight, you've replaced almost everything. The final lotus cake is even prettier than the first. The swans still look confused. But perhaps that's poetic. You stack the triangle loaves in baskets. Wrap the effigy in linen like a pharaoh. And tie the whole thing down like it's about to be offered to a river god. You stare at your work. It's imperfect, slightly off-center, smudged with fingerprints and stubborn hope. But it's real. And it will do. You turn to your cousin. Remind me to tell the priest's wig story again tomorrow. She grins. Only if you promise to wave the sandal like a scepter. Deal. You douse the fire, stretch your back, and drift towards sleep with the scent of honey and mild vengeance in the air. You wake just before dawn, head fuzzy, mouth dry, and hands already twitching in anticipation of flour. The smell of the courtyard hits first, dung smoke, baking crust, and something else. Slightly yeasty, slightly sour. It's beer day. Not drinking beer, mind you. Baking with it. A tradition as old as bread itself in this part of the world. The Egyptians brew beer so thick it looks like grain porridge and tastes like a bet gone wrong. But somehow, when you mix it with flour and leave it to rest, it becomes something soft, fragrant, and oddly fluffy. Magic? Maybe. Yeast? Definitely. Your cousin is already halfway through a clay mug. For testing purposes, she insists, wiping foam from her lip with a grin. You roll your eyes but take a sip anyway. It's warm, tangy, and tastes like what bread dreams about before it's born. The batch you're working on today is for the mid-morning market crowd, sailors, laborers, and temple scribes who enjoy their carbs with a hint of fermentation. Some of them claim the beer bread helps with digestion. Others say it helps with arguments. One time, a man bought a loaf, took 2 bites, and proposed marriage to a donkey handler. You don't ask questions. You begin mixing. The dough is softer than usual, almost sleepy. It clings to the bowl like it doesn't want to grow up. You sing to it under your breath, hoping your off-key humming won't scare the yeast. Historians still argue whether Egyptians understood yeast as a living thing or just assumed the gods are in charge of the bubbles. Either way, they were onto something. Your grandmother used to say beer bread was Osiris's breakfast. You're not sure what that means, but it sounds like something that belongs in a sacred brunch menu. Your cousin accidentally spills beer onto the hearth. It hisses, sizzles, and releases a smell so oddly comforting it almost makes you forget how tired your knees are. She sniffs the air dramatically. The smell of victory, she says. You chuckle. The smell of breakfast for people who still think they're warriors. You shape the loaves into small domes, soft, round, and gently puffed. They look like they want to nap. One by one, they go onto the warm stone in the oven, sizzling softly as they settle. That's when the boys arrive. 3 local apprentices from the carpenter's yard, already laughing and red-faced. One of them is definitely a little drunk. The other 2 are trying not to be. They stumble in, holding out a copper coin and asking, "Any of the happy bread left?" You give them a half-baked loaf. They cheer like it's gold. One of them bows to it. You're not sure if it's satire or religion. They sit in the corner and nibble their prize, talking nonsense about boats, ghosts, and a goat that may or may not be possessed. You listen while shaping the next batch. At one point, one of the boys offers to help and grabs a lump of dough. He presses it flat, folds it oddly, and declares, "This is bread. For lovers." It looks like a boot. You thank him, gently remove the lump, and pretend to place it in a special oven. It ends up as dog food. No one needs romantic boot bread in their life. The loaves start to crackle and brown. Their tops split just slightly, revealing soft interiors. You brush them with a bit of leftover date syrup for a glossy sheen. It's your own touch, sweetness on the outside, chaos within. Like your cousin. The apprentices leave, giggling into the morning. You wave them off and hope they don't propose to anyone else on the way home. With the oven still warm, you slide in the last batch. You and your cousin sit back, sip the remains of the beer, and listen to the gentle puff-puff of bread rising. You feel lightheaded. Not from drink but from satisfaction. This batch was good. Soft. Fluffy. Barely cursed. You lean back against the wall. Maybe I'll sell beer bread forever. You murmur. Your cousin nods. Until it sells you first. You both laugh. Then sit in silence, watching the steam curl from the oven like a quiet prayer. You know it's going to be a rough baking day when the ash bites back. It starts simple enough. A warm fire, a quiet morning, a tray of loaves rising gently on their reed mat. You feel calm, centered, confident. And that's always the first mistake. Your cousin pokes the fire while humming a song about a donkey with divine dreams. You smile, reaching for the paddle to check the loaves in the back of the oven. But as you lean in, the heat hits you like a curse. Your eyelids twitch. Your skin tightens. It's like staring into Ra's bad mood. You hesitate. This hesitation, this 1 second of doubt, is all the oven needs to strike. Your hand brushes the edge of the clay mouth and SZZZZK. Pain shoots through your fingers like a chariot on fire. You pull back with a hiss, clutching your hand, already cursing in 3 languages, 2 of them probably made up. Your cousin turns, alarmed, and rushes over with a cloth soaked in goat milk. Did it get you? You nod. The front edge. You nod again. Oof. The oven has chosen. She says this seriously, as if the clay is sentient. Which, in a way, it is. You sit down, hand throbbing, pride bruised, and contemplate your life choices. Maybe you should have become a fisherman, or a scroll copier, something cooler. Literally. But bakers burn. That's the truth of it. A rite of passage. No one respects a baker whose hands are smooth. Your grandmother once said she'd never trust anyone who didn't smell slightly like charcoal. The burn starts to calm. You wrap it up with a strip of linen dipped in honey. Not just for sweetness, honey actually helps. You're not a healer, but you've seen it work. The priest says it's divine. You say it's sticky. Both may be true. You limp back to the oven like a wounded soldier. The loaves are ready. Golden on the outside, soft within. One corner is darker than usual, probably because of the fire spirit's tantrum. You mutter an apology to the bread and remove it carefully, using your other hand this time. Your cousin, ever helpful, fans the ash cloud rising from the hearth, accidentally launching a plume into your face. You cough. She apologizes, then laughs. You join her, because you look ridiculous, eyes watering, face white with ash, hands mismatched like a bakery ghost. The courtyard fills with smoke and giggles. Then, a voice, a low, authoritative, not here for jokes kind of voice. Is the offering bread ready? You freeze. A priest. He's standing at the gate, robes pristine, expression unreadable. Behind him, a young temple boy carries an empty basket lined with gold-stitched linen. Fancy. You straighten up, dust off your tunic, try to hide the burn, and smile like you haven't just been slapped by a fireplace. Yes, Holy One, you say, bowing, fresh from the flames. The priest steps forward, inspecting each loaf with the care of someone judging newborns. He sniffs one, pokes another, squints at a third like it owes him money. Finally, he nods. Acceptable. You breathe again. Then he adds, next time. No scorch marks. You bite your tongue. Your cousin snorts behind you. The boy takes the bread, and they leave. You exhale like you've just escaped a pyramid trap. You sit again, hands still warm under the linen. Another day. Another trial by fire. Later, as you smear clay on the cracked oven base to patch it, your cousin says something about the oven spirit demanding sacrifice. You nod solemnly and whisper to the bricks, next time. Take my other hand. The sun climbs lazily into the sky, and your courtyard fills with the slow, hypnotic scrape thump of grain being ground. It's a sound you've known since you could crawl. It lives in your bones. You can hear it in your sleep. And today, it's louder than usual, because the grain grinders have arrived in full force. And they brought their opinions with them. They sit in a loose semicircle near the stone querns, dressed in simple linen, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back, grinding tools already dusty. The oldest one, Aunt Hetepsut, is practically legendary. Her arms are stronger than most bricklayers, and her tongue sharper than a fishmonger's knife. You greet them with bread and goat cheese. It's tradition. It also softens the blow of whatever they're about to say about your effigy loaf. The conversation starts innocent enough: weather, flour quality, the price of barley. Then it slides, as it always does, into the arena of village scandal. Did you hear about Sabu's daughter? Aunt Hetepsut says. grinding steadily without breaking eye contact. The others nod like birds. She was seen near the temple granary. At night, gasps. Raised eyebrows. A few clack-clack flour sifting gestures for dramatic effect. You pretend to focus on organizing baskets. But your ear is fully tuned in. These women could run an entire intelligence network if they weren't so busy with wheat. Your cousin joins them, casually plopping down and grabbing a quern. She's a good grinder but a better listener. Soon, she's giggling at something involving a priest, a donkey, and a misplaced blessing. You try to stay above it. Really? But it's hard when someone mentions your name. And did you see the baker's cousin trying to shape a swan loaf yesterday? Looked more like a drowned pigeon. Your cousin gasps. That was my swan. Laughter erupts. Even Aunt Hetepsut chuckles. Child. That swan would have gotten rejected from a soup. You sigh. Your reputation, like your hands, is forever flour-coated and gently roasted. Still, there's warmth here. The grinders aren't mean, they're just loud, full of life, and fueled by years of kneeling over stone. Their words cut, but their bread is always shared. You sit nearby, folding parchment, watching the rhythm of their arms, forward back, scrape thump, forward back. Their conversation ebbs and flows with the same beat. They shift to dreams, strange ones from last night. One woman swears she dreamt of a loaf that grew wings and flew out of the oven. Another says she heard someone whispering from her barley jar. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian women believed dreams came from gods, spirits, or too much fermented fig wine. You suspect a mix of all three. Suddenly, one grinder jumps up. A beetle, she shouts, pointing to a pile of grain. Chaos. Not because they fear beetles, but because the last time this happened, someone said it was an omen. Of what? No one agrees. Aunt Hetepsut squints at the insect. It's just a scarab. Sacred. Don't squish it. They all watch as the beetle climbs the edge of the quern and disappears behind a basket. Peace resumes. Mostly, you bring out a tray of fresh bread, soft, round, slightly nutty from the morning grind. The gossip fades as chewing begins. Chewing, after all, is the great equalizer. Aunt Hetepsut pats your shoulder. The bread's good, she says. Swan still needs work. You smile, nod, and accept your fate. You think you've seen it all. Swans made of dough. Priestly scowls. Children stealing flour in the night. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepares you for the moment a temple scribe accidentally tells you a secret recipe. It happens while you're delivering loaves to the priest's kitchen. The sun is just high enough to bake your skull. You're standing near a basket of offerings, half listening to a bored-looking scribe mutter instructions to a kitchen novice. And then, before the second rise, he sprinkles it with crushed date pit and ash from the incense altar. The scribe says, your ears perk up. You pretend to drop a loaf. Bend. Listen harder. Not just any ash, must come from myrrh burned during lunar prayers. That's what makes it sacred. The novice nods solemnly. You nod too. From behind a fig tree. That explains so much. You've tasted that bread before, once. During a festival. It was slightly sweet, oddly smoky, and definitely expensive. You return home with a grin. Already planning to experiment. Of course. You don't have temple incense ash lying around. But you have imagination, and a neighbor who burns herbs to keep scorpions away. That counts. Right? Your cousin is skeptical. You're going to what? Replicate sacred bread. You say proudly. Grinding dried dates and rummaging through bundles of dried plants. For research. She watches you mix date pit powder with sage smoke ash and whispers. If you turn into a frog. I'm not helping. The dough is different, darker, denser, with a scent that makes you think of temples, old scrolls, and things best whispered. You knead it like you're trying to impress the gods. Or at least not offend them. You bake it with care. Slow fire. Even heat. No distractions. The loaf that emerges is intriguing, burnt at the edges, soft in the center, mysterious, like a loaf that knows secrets but won't tell unless bribed with honey. You and your cousin taste it cautiously. She makes a face. Tastes like incense and regret. You disagree. It's not bad, just divine adjacent. Later, you try it again. Less sash. More date. Better. Word spreads. Quietly. Within a week, a neighbor stops by and asks, casually, "Do you still make that priestly loaf?" You nod. Sometimes, she slips you a papyrus scrap with her uncle's spice blend. Use this. It sings. You try it. It sings. Soon, you're experimenting late into the night. Pistachio dust, orange peel, mint, even a crushed blue lotus petal you weren't supposed to have. Your kitchen smells like an apothecary fell in love with a bakery. Historians still argue whether Egyptian priests kept their recipes secret to preserve religious power or because they were terrible at explaining things. Either way, you're building a little legend of your own. Eventually, you write the best version of the recipe on the back of a broken plate and hide it under your sleeping mat. Just in case your cousin finds it a week later. Really? Under the mat? You shrug. The safest place is where no one wants to sweep. You've never feared crocodiles much. Not because they aren't terrifying, they are big, sneaky, armored like living boats with too many teeth. But because you grew up near the canal. And you learned early, don't splash, don't stare, and never, never, carry meat in a reed basket unless you want your groceries to vanish with a growl. Still, today you're nervous. You're holding a tray of offering bread meant for Sobek, the crocodile-headed god of strength, protection, and appetite. The priests say this particular batch must be tested by living symbols of the deity, which, in simple terms, means actual crocodiles will taste the bread before it goes to the altar. You and your cousin look at the tray, then at each other. Did we sign up for this? She asks. No, you say. But we were volunteered. The bread is special, dense, glazed with honey, dusted with blue lotus powder, shaped like river waves, or what you hope look like river waves. You tried your best. You follow the temple boy toward the riverside enclosure, a shallow pond with reeds, mud, and two lazy crocodiles who look like they retired from hunting just to ruin someone's day. The priest greets you with a nod. Place the offering near the water. They'll choose what pleases the god. You step forward. Slowly. You can feel the heat of the sun, the weight of the bread, and the absolutely unwelcome sensation of crocodile eyes watching your ankles. You set the tray down, step back, and wait. The first crocodile does nothing. The second blinks once, then waddles forward with unsettling grace. It sniffs the tray, opens its mouth, and, chomp, takes the middle loaf. Everyone freezes. Then the priest claps once. Sobek approves. You exhale. Your cousin exhales. Even the crocodile seems pleased. It slinks back into the water. Loaf crumbs clinging to its jaw. The remaining loaves are collected. They'll be taken to the temple altar, blessed, and, if tradition holds, shared among the priests later. One of them once admitted the taste was surprisingly good. Another said, slightly soggy but holy. You wipe your forehead and laugh. Bread tested by reptiles. What could go wrong? Your cousin says. Just be glad it wasn't lions. Historians still argue whether crocodile tastings were symbolic or just creative animal control. You think both. It's a good way to recycle leftover dough and remind the villagers that gods don't play when it comes to snacks. On the walk back, a temple guard stops you. Did you make the wave bread? You nod. Cautiously. My niece dreams of being a baker. Can she watch you work sometime? You blink. Of course. It's the first time your work has been noticed beyond complaints about shape or color. You feel seen. Like maybe your dough isn't just feeding people. Maybe it's inspiring them. Or at least distracting them from crocodiles. Back at home, You find a spare lump of dough and shape it into something playful, a tiny crocodile. Mouth open. Back arched. You bake it until golden. Then place it on the windowsill. A little tribute. Your cousin walks by and raises an eyebrow. If that one eats the cat, I'm moving out. Bread is food. Bread is life. But in your village, bread is also negotiation. A good loaf can get you a favor. A great one can get you forgiveness. And if you know who to give it to, and when, you can open more doors than a palace key. It starts small. A neighbor shows up holding a chipped pot. I heard you made the Blue Lotus one again, she says, not quite asking. You hand her half a loaf. She smiles. Leaves you a sack of lentils. No words. No counting. Just flour for flavor economics. Your cousin calls it grain diplomacy. Then come the bribes. Not from criminals, those are rare. But from everyone else. A temple scribe asks if you can shape a loaf to look like the Eye of Horus. In return, he'll forget that you returned the scrolls late. You agree. Not because you're guilty. Just because you enjoy the challenge. A carpenter drops by to accidentally compliment your honey glaze. You give him 2 rolls. He fixes the wobble in your bench. Even Aunt Hatshepsut, queen of the grain grinders, trades gossip for garlic buns. You once gave a priest's assistant a cinnamon twist to delay the start of a ceremony, just enough time for your cousin to deliver the correct bread to the right altar. The gods were pleased. The assistant was sticky. Everyone won. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian bread was ever officially used as currency. You argue that it still is. Just unofficially. Loaf by loaf. Deal by deal. And then come the blessings. Not just for offerings, but for life. People ask you to bake for weddings. For births. For the return of a cousin from a long journey. You shaped a heart once, very abstract. And the bride cried. You shaped a boat another time. And the groom promised to name their child after you. He didn't. This week, a widow brings you a handful of dates and whispers. My son returns from the mines. Make him something warm. You do. A soft round loaf with fennel and molasses. Wrapped in cloth. She picks it up without a word but leaves behind a tiny clay amulet carved like a cat. It's still on your shelf. Your cousin watches all this with mild amusement. You realize you're running a bakery and a temple. You nod. With fewer curses and more crust. The lines between sacred, practical, and emotional blur like flour in the air. A loaf isn't just food, it's memory. It's apology. It's quiet joy. One time, a feuding couple came to your door separately, both asking for just a small loaf. But one with no sharp crust, and maybe soft inside. You baked them too. Not identical. One had cinnamon. One had orange zest. They left without speaking to each other. Days later, you saw them sitting on the temple steps, sharing a date cake. Bread speaks. There's a tradition in your street during heavy rains. People bake hope loaves, small round buns with a sesame seed pressed in the center. You're not sure who started it. But whenever the clouds roll in, your oven is filled with quiet offerings. Just in case the river stays kind. Children ask for wish bread. You shape theirs into stars. Or fish. Or birds, whatever they dream. They close their eyes when they eat the first bite. You never ask what they wished for. That's not the baker's job. The elderly ask for memory loaves. Usually soft. With dates or fig jam. Something gentle. Easy to chew. But more than that, something that tastes like a time they still remember. Your cousin once joked that if your bread shop were any more sentimental, people would bring flowers just to stand in line. You laughed. And then you shaped a loaf that looked like a flower. You don't always understand why a loaf matters to someone, but you can see it in how they carry it. Some cradle it. Some press it to their chest. Some unwrap it slowly, like it holds a secret. And maybe, in a way, it does. That night, you bake extra. No orders. No requests. Just for the ones you care about. You shape them without names, just feelings. A loaf for patience, one for laughter, one for luck, and one, just in case tomorrow is hard. You leave them wrapped in cloth, resting near the window. The stars blink overhead like someone's baking in the sky. The loaf that caused a divorce. Bread. The pillar of civilization. The golden, crusty, warm-hearted center of all ancient domestic drama. You might think political intrigue or religious betrayal tore families apart in ancient times. But no, sometimes it was just bread. Let's set the stage. Picture a modest Roman home. Clay walls, tiny windows, one grumpy parrot in the corner yelling Latin insults. A husband returns from the bakery, proud of his latest acquisition, one perfectly shaped panis quadratus. Still warm, with the telltale chisel marks on top. It smells divine, slightly smoky, a little nutty. The kind of smell that makes a man feel powerful, like Caesar himself. If Caesar was married to an angry woman named Livia, who had spent the entire day scraping soot off the walls and boiling questionable lentils, took one look at the loaf and narrowed her eyes. "This is what you bring home?" she asked, pointing at the bread as though it had personally insulted her mother. "Yes," he said proudly, "fresh from the bakery. I waited an hour." She sniffed. "It's burnt." He blinked. "It's rustic, it's lazy, it's traditional, it's an embarrassment." Thus began the great bread argument of 123 AD by modern standards. It sounds ridiculous. But in the Roman world, bread wasn't just food, it was social standing. The wrong bread could suggest you were poor. Or worse, indifferent to your wife's baking superiority. Livia had been known in their insular, apartment block, as a champion baker. Her honey-glazed flat bread was whispered about on the stairwell. Her spiced wheat cakes caused envy and mild violence. So when her husband came home with store-bought bread, burnt, no less, it was like saying, "Your talents mean nothing. I prefer this charred lump of sadness." The argument escalated. He claimed she overused cumin. She threw a pestle at his head. He retaliated by feeding the loaf to the neighbor's dog. The dog vomited. Livia sobbed. The neighbors gossiped. The parrot yelled. Panis horribilis. By sundown, the marriage was in ruins. She stormed off to her sister's home in the Subura district, dragging her favorite bread paddle behind her. He, in a fit of culinary regret, tried to toast the remaining loaf over a brazier, setting part of the curtain on fire. By morning, the only thing left intact was the parrot, still muttering about burnt crust. Now, was this story written in the annals of Roman history? No. But on a wax tablet discovered in a bakery's back room in Pompeii, archaeologists found the scribbled remains of what appears to be a domestic complaint: "He brings home bread not mine. May Mercury curse his digestion." It's not hard evidence, but it's evocative. What we do know is this: bread in Rome was serious business. With over 300 bakeries in the city at one point, and laws regulating flour prices, the grain supply was more closely monitored than temple finances. Bakers were respected, sometimes even feared. A good loaf could open doors. A bad one? End marriages. Divorce in Rome was surprisingly casual. Legally speaking, just say "I divorce you 3 times, or write it, and you were free to go. But social consequences were messier. If your neighbors found out the cause was a botched bread choice, you could become a punchline in dinner party jokes for months. Marcus, ruined by rye. Gaius the Graceless, couldn't tell wheat from barley. Bread was identity. Bread was status. Bread was life. So yes, somewhere in the steaming, bustling, gossip-filled streets of ancient Rome, a loaf of bread very likely ended a perfectly average marriage. Not because it was burnt, but because it was the wrong choice, at the wrong time, delivered to the wrong woman, by a man who didn't notice her tired hands or the flour still clinging to her sleeves. History loves grand battles and epic betrayals. But sometimes, the most human stories are hidden in crumbled crusts and cooling ovens. And if you listen closely, maybe you'll hear that parrot, still echoing through time, Let's say you're dead. No offense. Just hypothetically. You've lived a good life in ancient Egypt. You've paid your taxes in wheat. You've said nice things about the pharaoh, at least in public. You've baked your daily bread. Shared your lentils. And maybe, just maybe, eaten a sweet honey cake once in a while. A real treat. Now here you are, lying comfortably in a stone tomb surrounded by, well, not much. The afterlife awaits. But hold on, where's the food? Sure. The priests chanted. The embalmer did his thing with natron and resin. But you're hungry. Afterlife eternity is a long time to go without snacks. Fortunately, the people who loved you knew this. And they took action. They smuggled pastries into your tomb. Not just any pastries. We're talking delicately shaped date cakes. Sesame sweets. Tiny loaves decorated with swirls. Spirals. And sometimes, tiny carvings of gods with suspiciously cinnamon roll-shaped hats. Some of these were tucked into ceramic jars. Others were sealed in baskets, hidden beneath linen. A few were placed right next to your mummified face. So you'd wake up to the aroma of ancient sugar and spices. And if you were lucky, someone might have slipped in a honey-drizzled dumpling shaped like the sacred scarab beetle. Because nothing says eternal peace like carbohydrates in the shape of a dung beetle. Of course, officially, these offerings were meant for the gods. The ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead is full of detailed instructions on what to say when offering bread, beer, ox, goose, cakes, and incense to Osiris, Anubis, and company. But everyone knew the truth. The gods weren't the ones eating that goose-shaped cookie. You were. Or at least, your car, your spiritual double, was. And if your family couldn't afford to stuff your tomb with real pastries, no problem. They just drew them on the wall. That's right. Ancient tombs are filled with paintings of food. Tables overflowing with cakes, flatbreads, jars of honey, bowls of figs and nuts, so vivid that even after 3,000 years, archaeologists still get hungry when they see them. The belief was simple: what was drawn could become real in the afterlife. That's why so many tomb walls look like bakery menus. It's also why some sneaky souls requested things they never ate in life, like roast duck, or wine imported from Syria. You requested a giant pyramid-shaped cake topped with golden almonds and glazed pomegranate seeds. No one had ever seen such a thing. But the scribe painted it anyway, with love, and maybe a little sarcasm. Now, let's address the elephant, or perhaps the hippopotamus, in the tomb. Sometimes, the pastries went missing. Imagine a poor embalmer, overworked and underpaid, eyeing that honey loaf nestled beside the deceased. He glances around, mutters something about sacred offerings, and takes a bite. It's stale, but still good. Boom. Tomb robbery by muffin. Archaeologists have found bite marks on some offerings. Others were clearly nibbled by mice. And yes, sometimes even priests helped themselves, for spiritual testing purposes. Of course. But the cleverest families got around this by using fake pastries. Yes, fake pastries. Crafted from painted clay or carved from limestone. These non-edible sweets were placed in tombs as symbolic food. They looked delicious, but they were solid as rock, literally. Did the car enjoy chewing on a rock pastry for eternity? Maybe. Or maybe spiritual jaws are more forgiving. Either way, it was the thought that counted. And the thought was clear: even in death, you should never be without dessert. In some elite tombs, like that of Queen Meresank III, archaeologists found pastry molds and clay ovens placed carefully next to the sarcophagus. Because in the afterlife, why rely on others when you can bake your own? Imagine waking up in the field of reeds, Egypt's version of paradise, with nothing but a golden spatula and your grandmother's secret recipe for sesame date cake. You roll up your sleeves, metaphorically, and get to work. Eternity? Bring it on. You've got snacks. So if you're ever wandering through an ancient necropolis and stumble upon a faded wall painting of a pie with wings, or a bread roll shaped like a cat, know this: you've spent the day kneading dough by the banks of the Nile, the warm sun baking bricks on the mud brick walls. You've sold loaves shaped like lotus flowers at sunrise, and by noon, you were elbow deep in date sweets for the temple offerings. But now the day has quieted. The marketplace has emptied. The songbirds have flown home. The only sound is the whisper of palm leaves in the gentle breeze and the distant lowing of cattle. You take a deep breath, taste the lingering sweetness of honey on your fingers, and realize something: tonight, you're going to bake one last batch, under the stars. Why? Because tomorrow is the Feast of Thoth, and even priests need pastries to scribble on. Because the Bakers' Guild will pay better for nocturnal bread, claiming that lunar-touched dough brings wisdom. Because the sky is clear, and the stars are bright, and somehow, the idea of working when everyone else sleeps feels poetic. Or maybe you're just bored. Either way, you set up your small clay oven at the edge of the village, near the tip of the desert where the sand meets the river's clay banks. You load your basket with ingredients: a sack of finely sifted emmer flour, so white it almost glows under the moonlight; jars of date syrup so dark it seems to swallow the light; a handful of crushed sesame seeds mixed with a pinch of cinnamon, carried over from the southern spice traders; a small morsel of fresh yeast in a clay jar, bubbling quietly like it's sacrificing itself for the cause. You light a small brazier, coaxing sparks from dry reeds. Flames dance, waxy and crackling, almost mirroring the distant stars overhead. The desert air is cool against your skin, an unexpected treat after a scorching day. You sprinkle a handful of flour across your simple wooden board and begin. First, you dissolve the yeast in a bowl of warm Nile water, watching tiny bubbles rise like silt in the river. Then you pour in the flour, folding gently until the dough comes together in your hands. It feels soft, pliable, like a promise. You push and press, shape and pull, coaxing elasticity until the dough responds like a toddler begging for attention. While the dough rests, you prepare the filling. The date syrup swirls between your fingertips as you add the crushed sesame seeds and cinnamon. A fragrant haze drifts upward, under the pale moon. The spices glint like tiny stars themselves. You taste a pinch, sweet, nutty, with a hint of smoke from the brazier. It's the end-of-season offering, the finest you've made all year, maybe even longer. The priests of Thoth, god of scribes and wisdom, believe that anything consumed during his feast will grant clarity of mind. You imagine the scribes devouring your pastries and suddenly writing the most enlightened texts to grace the temple walls. Perhaps one of them will pen a new hymn to Amit. Maybe they'll fix your name in their scrolls, praising you as the baker touched by the moon. A gentle breeze ripples through the date palms. The Milky Way arches overhead, a milky ribbon drifting across the sky. Orion's belt points toward the west, as if guiding your hand. Somewhere beyond the horizon, cats prowl among the tombs, searching for scraps. You try not to think about them. You dust the dough once more, rolling it out until it's thin enough to catch the light from the brazier. Tiny gold flecks, traces of actual gold leaf, cling to your fingertips from a previous gilded confection. You brush them aside and grin. A baker must have opulence in at least one batch. Right? You fold a spoonful of date sesame filling into the center of each circle of dough, carefully pinching the edges so no syrup leaks during baking. The shapes resemble little satchels, gifts waiting to be opened. You place them on the flat stone slab laid over the glowing coals. As they bake, you lean back and let your mind drift. In quieter moments, you wonder what it's like to be a scribe, pen trembling, ink dragging across papyrus. You imagine writing down cosmic secrets by lamplight. But then your stomach growls, reminding you that you're not a scribe at all. You're a baker, which is, arguably, just as important. After all, A scribe with an empty stomach can't think clearly. The pastries begin to brown, forming those telltale caramelized bubbles on their edges. Steam rises in gentle plumes, swirling toward the heavens. You gently lift one with a reed spatula, turning it so that the heat is even. The dough crackles softly. You breathe in the warm aroma of honey-sweetened dates and smoked sesame. It's a scent that sticks in your memory. Tonight, the desert air carries it beyond your own senses. Perhaps to the ears of wandering travelers thinking they've stumbled upon the God's own bakery. You know this batch must be perfect. It has to be. If the priests of Thoth taste anything less than perfection, they might blame it on imperfect lunar alignment. They'll demand more night-baked pastries next month, maybe with fresh figs or pomegranate seeds. You're already exhausted at the thought. But for now, you're determined. You don't rush. Each pastry is lifted off the stone and placed into a woven palm basket. Its warmth almost singing. The stars above glitter as though applauding your handiwork. It seems as if the universe itself is rewarding you. By the time you finish the 11th pastry, the horizon begins to lighten with a faint purple glow. The festival gates in Thebes will open soon. Caravans are already gathering. You can imagine the crowd, priests in linen kilts, scribes adjusting their ink pots, musicians tuning lyres. Tomorrow, they'll devour your nocturnal pastries while chanting hymns to Thoth. Tomorrow, you'll be exhausted, standing by your stall, forcing smiles on your face as you hand out pastry after pastry. But tonight is for you. Tonight, you are the guardian of sweetness under the silent watch of the heavens. As the final pastry slides into the palm basket, you close your eyes and listen. A soft hush blankets the desert, the only movement the distant ripple of a camel caravan on the far dunes. Somewhere a jackal howls, and you recall the story of Anubis guiding souls. Maybe these pastries will accompany a scribe to the weighing of hearts. Maybe a baker's offering in the afterlife should be just as sweet as one given to the living. You wipe sweat and soot from your brow with a linen scrap, flip a final glance skyward, and whisper a quiet benediction, "May Ra smile upon these." Then, before dawn breaks, you sling the warm basket across your back and make your way toward Thebes. Footsteps light on the sand. You carry not just pastries, but a story of moonlit devotion, and perhaps a touch of magic bestowed by the stars themselves. Tomorrow, they'll ask how you managed to bake such perfect sweets when everyone else was sleeping. You'll smile and shrug as though it's no big deal. You might even credit the lunar alignment. But deep down, you'll know, it was the quiet of the desert night, the hush of palm fronds, the shimmering canopy of stars, and the steady flame of your brazier that made a final batch under the stars possible. And when the first rays of Ra's sun finally reach you, you'll know that for one glorious night, you were both baker and astronomer, alchemist and dreamer, all under the benevolent gaze of the Egyptian sky.